One of the biggest weekends of the summer for the Pennsylvania Posse. We were yeeing a couple more haws than we usually do. We had a race at Port Royal on Wednesday night and then two events at Selinsgrove for the Summer Nationals, all of those with the World of Outlaws, along with a Saturday night show at Selinsgrove and a Sunday night at BAPS. Before we get into the race results, first off in the news bracket, one of the most intense and toughest rivalries in motorsports and even sports, the Outlaws versus Posse, and I like when people do things more respectfully than the rivalry between the Outlaws and the Posse, but that's fine. We're having fun with it. This week was 3 races. It was 1, 1, and 1, as there was an Outlaw driver winning one race, a Posse driver winning one, and then somebody who's not affiliated with either of them winning the third. So even distribution there, I guess. Second thing in the bracket, Mike Heffner's number 27 was back out on track and was being driven in what I was told is a one-off deal. Darren Pittman was behind the wheel for the first time with Mike Heffner since, 2011. So he was a fill-in for this weekend to race the car at the Summer Nationals. And from what I heard, and this can move into the second piece of this, is that is not a set deal that's going to last. That was a one-off weekend deal, and the 27 is supposedly going to have a different driver in the car for the rest of the year. Some of the possible people that I heard it won't be Briggs Danner because of the 5G car deal. It won't be Corey Eliason, as far as I've heard, because of the Indy Race Parts deal. I don't know if that could possibly change in my mind, but I don't know. There were some people that I thought of as possibilities for that car. Number one was Aaron Bollinger, who started the year off with the John Westbrook racing car at the Grove, but he lost that seat. I also thought Pat Cannon is a big possibility, especially after he hasn't driven anything besides the 23 car at the start of the year. And then I thought Austin Bishop, because Austin Bishop has been doing pretty well with the 11A car, and I could definitely see him moving over and getting in the 27. Heffner usually likes to bring in younger guys, although Darren Pittman isn't a part of that group anymore, but I think Bishop's a pretty good possibility, although I could also see some of those other guys that I mentioned getting in that car. And the last piece, now this is a little interesting because usually at Selinsgrove, when there's a 410 race, the field hasn't been filling up as much as past years. There's yet to be anybody who didn't qualify for a feature race in 410 competition there. It's not as odd this weekend that the count was lower, but just generally over the season so far, it's been pretty low, and especially with the Speed Week race, which was right before the 4th of July and was the last race of that championship, that there were only 23 cars there. That's interesting to me. All right, let's start it off with the races on July 20th, a.k.a. Wednesday. There were 33 cars present on a Wednesday night race at Port Royal. That's pretty fun. World of Outlaws starting off the journey of the week. Heat races went to Kyle Larson, Sheldon Haudenschild, Danny Dietrich, and Donnie Schatz. Don't remember if that's the right order or not. And then Kyle Larson went on to win the Dash. That car was hooked up all night long, and really, nobody had anything for him. Even when the track started at the end of the race to get slicked off, Anthony Macri got a little stronger, but there was no catching Kyle Larson. So Kyle Larson won his first race at Port of the year and his fourth of the World of Outlaws schedule. He led to the line Danny Dietrich, Anthony Macri, and the rest of the top 10 you see here. There was some excitement as usual, and Port Royal is a beautiful racetrack, but the race went flag to flag, which was cool to see. It's always good to have a nice clean race go down once in a while. On to night number 1 of the Summer Nationals at Selinsgrove. The night started off pretty well, everybody racing all grand and fine, and then heat races, and then one of the big things to talk about of the weekend, Freddie Raymer versus Danny Dietrich. So the replay shows that what happens is they go into the last set of corners in the final lap of their heat race. Danny Dietrich sends it in way deeper than Freddie did, and he runs right up to the tail end of the 8 car. There had been some previous extracurriculars of these two getting a little close for comfort, not really having a great time around each other. And that kind of built into what happened after this wreck, where Fred Raymer, who's Freddie's dad and also a legend sprint car driver in Pennsylvania, had some words to say to Danny Dietrich, but they all ended up just using their fists instead of their mouths, and it was a big slow in the pits. And it was fun. I watched it from the front stretch. I had a good time. Later in the night, we saw 2 pretty significant crashes. Matt Campbell and Robbie Price both flipped in turns 3 and 4 in the Last Chance Showdown. Campbell flipped out of the racetrack. Price flipped up and got cocked weird when he came to a rest on his nose, leaning against the guardrail that the car was straight up in the air. But that was the majority of the calamity throughout the night, as at the end of this, the A main didn't have any major crashes. There were a few yellows, and the yellows really worked into the favor of Lance Deweese, who was very strong but had lost a bit of time at the very beginning of the race to the leader, Brent Marks, and to Brad Sweet, who was up there at that time as well. And then the yellow brought everybody back together, and Lance Deweese was able to make the big passes on the inside of the racetrack, and he won the first night of the Summer Nationals over Brent Marks and Anthony Macri, along with the top 10 here. So then we move on to Saturday, which was, to give credit, Donnie Schatz's 2000th start with the World of Outlaws series. Anthony Macri fastest at the beginning of the night. In qualifying, the heat races went fairly well. The Outlaws started showing their power really during these heat races, as Donnie Schatz won the first one, James McFadden won the second one, David Gravel won the third one, and then the fourth one went to a Posse guy, Devin Borden, with a great run. Sheldon Haudenschild won the dash and swept the top three in that for the Outlaws drivers. This was the moment where Brad Sweet really started to show that he was racing for a win, and it also showed that Danny Dietrich was realistically the big hope for the Posse if they were going to double up for the weekend at the track. It took Brent Marks, the hottest driver in sprint car racing, the last transfer spot of the Last Chance Showdown to make it into the feature, which was a big headline that it took him that much, and he had that much of a struggle on Saturday night. During the feature, Donnie Schatz made an early pass on Sheldon Haudenschild and led the first few laps, but Sheldon took the lead back on lap 7. The trio of Sheldon Haudenschild, Donnie Schatz, and Brad Sweet were all out in a league of their own, and these three had pretty good racing going on. And in that mess, it kind of kept Danny Dietrich close-ish. On lap 18, Carson Macedo flipped in turn 3, and that ended his night, as well as Kyle Larson's, as Macri and Kyle Larson were caught up in that mess. They were all in the back half of the top 10 at the time, so that took some bigger names out of the contention pile. Sheldon Haudenschild built a huge gap on the restart, and Brad Sweet was able to make a pass that put him in position to run down Sheldon, and he was able to do that. Danny Dietrich started to follow and get a little stronger at this point. At the end of that, as Sweet and Dietrich could get around Haudenschild, Sweet beat Dietrich and won his first race at the Williams-Grove in his career. He led Danny and Sheldon with the rest of the top 10 shown here, including Freddie Raymer, who was fined $500 for all of the calamity of Friday night, bounced back to finish 5th, which means he made back some money that he could pay that fine with. That same night, a little further north in Pennsylvania, we had Selinsgrove Speedway hosting a 410 event alongside some modified racing there. There were only 15 drivers who showed up to that race, which was a little shorter list than I guess you would have expected, but tires and gas prices right now kind of make sense. Mark Smith and Ryan Smith were the two guys to win the heat races, and then at the end of it, the hometown kid, the Selinsgrove sensation, Blaine Heimbach won over Ryan Smith and Nick Swigert, who had a great run. A guy who's just starting out with 410s. He's only appeared 7 times and made 3 events so far with his career in the 410, but a great showing from him and the rest of the top 10 here on the screen. And then on July 24th, a.k.a. Sunday, we went to BAPS. 15 cars showed up once again, and not a super eventful evening, no incidents or anything, just some racing. And Danny Dietrich finally got his win of the weekend. It was his 10th win in a 410 this season over Freddie Raymer and Chase Dietz in the top 3 with the rest of the order of the top 10 shown. And, hey, look at this. Finally, after, 4 rainouts, there's finally a BAPS 410 race this season. And unfortunately, not a huge turnout just because of all of the racing that already had happened during the weekend. So that's the conclusion of the rundown for everything that happened from July 20th to 24th. Hopefully you enjoyed watching. Shoutouts to B-Blaze Vintage for some help and the enjoyment of Friday evening. His link's down below. And, of course, Matt Faust, my man, coming in clutch on Saturday night at Williams-Grove. Big shout out to Matt Faust. His link's in the description as well. Another link down there, dirtnerddata.weebly.com, just has a bunch of statistics on stuff. And I hope you guys enjoyed. So thanks for watching again, and we'll see you in the next video.